Hi there, Linda from Let's Talk Prepping. And today's Wall Street Journal said that there's a 71% increase in physical attacks on the power grid compared to 2022. So let's look at that, and then let's plan on what we can do in case our power goes out. How are we going to prepare? What can we do to make our lives a little bit easier without power? So let's go over here and look at what the Wall Street Journal had to say. Okay, we're over here at the Wall Street Journal, and they say power grid attacks surge and are likely to continue, study finds. Confidential analysis shows sharp rise in targeting of facilities with gunfire, intrusion, and vandalism. And this is today's date, February 21st, 2023, by Catherine Blunt. And she says that the physical attacks on the U.S. power grid rose 71% last year compared to 2021. Okay, I said 2022 before, but 2021. And will likely increase this year, according to confidential industry analysis viewed by the Wall Street Journal. And you can listen to the audio of some of the text. I can't get the rest of it because I'm not a member. I haven't paid. But if we go over here to Yahoo Finance, they talk about the same thing here, and they quote the Wall Street Journal, and it says it's jumped 71%. The number of attacks on the power grid infrastructure soared last year due to a series of clustered physical attacks in the Southeast, Midwest, and Pacific Northwest. Then it was reported to the Wall Street Journal, there seems to be a pattern where people are targeting critical infrastructure, probably with the intent to disrupt. Well, why else would they target it if they're not going to disrupt it? They've seen a surge in the number of physical attacks on the U.S. power grid infrastructure. And then they go through and they talk about some of the attacks here. And then if we go over here again to the Wall Street Journal, and again by Catherine Blunt, February 18th, but this is 2022, America's power grid is increasingly unreliable. Behind a rising number of outages are new stresses on the system caused by aging power lines, a changing climate, and a power plant fleet rapidly going green. So the U.S. electrical system is becoming less dependable, and the problem is likely to get worse before it gets better. Large, sustained outages have occurred with increasing frequency in the U.S. over the past 2 decades, and they reviewed the data. It said in 2020 there were fewer than 24 major disruptions, and now the number has surpassed 180, so that's a big difference there. And this is CNBC Business, why the U.S. is struggling to modernize the electric grid. So blackouts are growing more frequent. The average American experienced just over 8 hours of power outages in 2020, with the overall duration of power interruption in the U.S. more than doubling since 2015. Now, I don't know about you, but I certainly had more than 8 hours of power outages. Winter storms, the winds, summer storms. I mean, I've had 8 hours in one day. Now, granted, I live where there are a lot of trees in the area, and they do knock out the lines, but 8 hours is pretty small for me. So it's not because the grid has changed, but because there's so much of a greater threat from extreme weather. And here's from offthegridnews.com, 6 power grid problems that should terrify you. And we know the age of the power grid. We know that it's old and originally designed to last 50 years. Many parts have surpassed that. There are even parts that are 100 years old, yet little is being done to replace the aged parts. Increased blackouts from power grid failure. And this is an interesting statistics. Major blackouts are on the upswing. Incredibly, over the past 2 decades, the blackouts impacting at least 50,000 customers have increased 124%. Risk of an EMP or a solar storm. This is what bothers me the most. If we ever have an EMP, things are just going to go, they're just going to get terrible. It's going to be a disaster. And the possibility of cyber warfare. Every day our power grid is tickled by foreign hackers attempting to infiltrate and find ways of taking control and cutting off our power. The cutting edge of cyber warfare is in China, with Russia close behind. It is believed, in fact, that at the highest levels of our intelligence community, that China could shut down our power grid at any time. This has already been done in other countries. One example was when Russia shut down the grid in Ukraine. If they can do it, you can be sure that China can as well. And then direct attacks against the power grid. And they say taking out as few as 9 critical substations in our country could destroy the entire grid. And even though the locations of these substations are tightly held secret, our enemies certainly are trying to learn where they are. So these are some of the things that should terrify you about the power grid. And today's article was in the Wall Street Journal, saying the number of attacks have gone up 71%. And here's Newsmax, and they're talking about the record number of U.S. power grid attacks in 2022. More than 100 power grid attacks took place in the U.S. from January to August, breaking this nation's record for power grid attacks in 1 year. The previous peak, according to federal records, was 97 incidents for all of 2021. And again, another thing from Newsmax, power grid attacks on the rise, likely to continue, study says. And they're just quoting the Wall Street Journal of a 71% increase in power grid attacks. And then there's also the problem of once we have a major power grid attack, how do we get the equipment you need to bring it back online? Because just getting transformers is supposedly very hard. Now, this is from July 2022, but the U.S. is running short on critical power grid component, large transformers. So we know we can't function without them. So over 90% of the energy consumed in the U.S. passes through large power transformers. So it said before the pandemic, you could get a large transformer ordered in less than a year. Today, that's rare. Even a year, if you had to wait with a year without electricity so that they could order a transformer, that would be terrible. So what should we do? I mean, a 1-day outage, we can deal with it. But suppose you have a 1-week outage. That's a lot more troublesome. Or an even longer outage, we better be ready. So what do you have to do? Well, you have to have the water and your food. You're going to have some way to light things. You're going to have refrigeration. So suppose you have a gas generator. Make sure you have enough gasoline on hand. If you have a propane generator, make sure you have enough propane. If it's an outage just in your general area, maybe you can go outside of your area to get more gasoline for your generator. But if it's a larger area, say a 300-mile area, you're not going to go 300 miles just to get a few gallons of gasoline. So make sure you have enough stored and that your gas generator is working. Get a solar generator if you can. Water is so important. Make sure you have enough water on hand. Have a few gallons. Have a gallon per person per day. And that's the minimum amount you would want. Fill up jugs with water, especially if you have a winter storm coming or a hurricane coming. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure if it's wintertime, you know how to heat your home or to stay warm. If it's summer and it's really hot, what are you going to do? Make sure that you have maybe some battery-operated fans to keep a little bit cool during the summertime. Plan ahead. Think about it now. Now you're being warned by the Wall Street Journal, of all places, that this is happening and it could happen even more. So start preparing yourself. Remember, people start to panic when the electric is out for a long time. You don't want that to happen. Get your battery-operated radio so you can hear about what's going on and when they plan to bring the electric back online. Again, refrigeration is going to be a big thing. We were out of an electric for about a week one summer, and I lost everything in the refrigerator. So plan ahead on what you're going to do, but get the basics down: your water, your heat, your cooling, your food. Make sure you have all of that, and leave a comment down below if there's anything else that you might have to tell us. Thanks for watching.